My name is Alex Brown, and I'm in 8th grade.
What kind of things do you enjoy?
Playing soccer and wrestling.
What is your favorite position in soccer? What do you typically play?
I'm usually a defender.
All right. What do you hope to do when you grow up?
I haven't really made a choice yet, but I don't know.
You're going to just be a kid for a while first?
Yes.
Well, would you like to share some stories or maybe small memories you have of your father?
I remember going fishing, and we went canoeing, and then I think I fell into the lake. I remember that.
Did your dad help you out?
Yeah, but he was mad.
That's how dads can be. Well, parents, to be fair. Well, can you think of some things that you wish you could have enjoyed with your father?
Probably him watching me play soccer or wrestle.
Yeah, you were very young when you lost your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he'd be very proud to see you doing those things now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
So I'm Isaac Brown. I'm a junior in high school and I have interests in robotics and construction.
What would you like to do when you grow up?
I've been looking into the construction industry, but as I go on with friends and talk to them, I find myself looking more into robotics, like just building on the future of something we don't really have today.
Awesome. That sounds really interesting. Good. Well, would you like to share some memories that you have of your father?
Yeah. So I remember when my dad and I, as well as my brother Alex, we would go and we got in the car and we drove to Wisconsin, and went up to the apartment in which my Grandpa Brown lived, and it was really nice them visiting each other and seeing them hug each other and tell me some stories that they had. And the only reason we really went there was we were all going to go to the water park together, and we had a lot of fun there. Another memory was my dad taught me a lot of respect. So I used to be really naughty and mess around a lot, but he always told me things just to like keep your head up and always think about what other people are thinking, and just being respectful in that manner and keeping integrity.
Sounds like you had a wonderful father. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, December 27th, 1979. So almost my birthday.
Almost.
Yeah.
Well, good. So were you the first of the children in your family?
I am the middle child. I have a brother who is 7 years older than me and a sister who is 7 years younger than me. So, and all of us we've all been born and raised in Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay. And what did your parents do while you were growing up?
My father was a heating and air conditioning technician, and my mother was more or less a stay-at-home mom, and then she worked for a company called IRA, I think it was. They scanned grocery items for tracking purposes. I have no idea what it was. I was in high school, so.
Okay.
So yeah.
So 7 years apart for each of the children is enough years that you'd be in different stages of life. Have you all been able to maintain closeness?
We have now. Growing up, it was difficult. Dealing with a teenager when you have a 7-year-old, and then when I was a teenager, I had a 7-year-old sister. But now that we're all adults, we are actually all really close.
That's good.
So, yeah.
And everyone lives local to your parents?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So growing up, what activities were you involved in?
In high school, I wasn't in any particular program at school, but we had a thing called Central Campus, and that was for all the local schools to come to, and they were extra classes you could take, and I took radio and television broadcasting my junior and senior year, and then I initially went to school in Fort Dodge, Iowa Central Community College for broadcasting as well. And then I moved to DMAC in Ankeny, Iowa for entrepreneurship and business management.
Good.
Yeah.
So at some point along the way, your plans got rearranged a little bit when you met your husband.
Yes. I met Casey my first year at DMAC. He was in the National Guard through Wisconsin, and he was actually coming to Camp Dodge in Johnston, Iowa for his 2 weekends, a year that they do. And so they were at Camp Dodge, and me and my friend Kelly were at a bar, and that was the bar that all the military guys, I guess, were told to go to, and so that's where we met. We danced the night away, and then he went back to Wisconsin, but then he called me every single day afterwards, and we ended up dating long distance while he was in Wisconsin, and each month we would take a weekend. So I would go to Wisconsin for the weekend 1 month, and then the next month he would come to Iowa for the weekend.
So how far of a commute was that?
It's about 4 or 5 hours.
So that was quite a bit of time driving
Yes.
back and forth to
Yeah.
see each other.
It ended up being really convenient though, because my friend Christina dated a friend who happened to live in Wisconsin at the time too. And so we would travel up there together, and then we introduced them two to each other so they could drive here.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So,
That's a good idea.
yeah.
So the night that you guys were dancing, was there a particular song that became your song?
No, not really, actually. We never really had a song back then, which is kind of weird. We both listen to country music, so, but yeah, we never really had a song.
Okay, so lots of country music
Yeah.
dancing that night.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you guys do when you got together on the weekends?
When I would go to Wisconsin, he would show me all around. I would go and visit his aunts and uncles, and we went to Wisconsin Dells one weekend, and then one time it was the Cranberry Festival, so we went and did that. A lot of times it was just, he was from Janesville, Wisconsin, and it was they're known for their city of parks, and so each time we would go up there, he would introduce me to a new park that they have. So I think they have well over, I think it was like 1,000 parks or something like that in a town of like 80,000 people. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So it was like a never-ending park.
Lots of things to do.
Yeah. And then when he came here, we would usually go out with my friends and their boyfriends and girlfriends, and go to movies and stuff like that. So yeah.
Good. So it sounds like you guys got serious fairly quickly.
Yes. Yep. We dated 18 months long distance. We were on our way to Wisconsin. He had come to visit, and it was, I don't even remember if it was spring break or something, but he had come to visit, and we were driving back to Wisconsin, and he asked me to marry him in the car.
While he was driving?
Yeah, while he was driving. And I said, I'm not saying yes until you have a ring. And all of a sudden, out pops the ring.
While he's driving?
Yeah, while he's driving. And I was just like, where'd you get this ring? Like, how does this even happen? And so of course I said yes. I called my mom right away as we were driving, and to this day she swears she did not hear me at all, because I remember saying, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes, and my mom just said, okay. And that was her response, and I was just like, oh, that's kind of a weird response from a mother.
So from her perspective, were you just, she couldn't understand you because you were so excited?
Yes, yeah. And so she had to, it was a full week before I came back, and we were sitting outside a gas station, my mom and I talking, and all of a sudden I just went like this, and she was like, "What is that on your hand?" And I was like, "It's my ring, Mom." And she's like, "What ring?" And I was like, "I told you we got engaged." And she's like, "No, you didn't." And I was like, "Of course you did." I was wondering why you were just like, "Okay," like it was, you know.
Oh,
just
that is so funny.
Yeah. So that was our story. Of
How did your families feel about the engagement?
They were completely happy. They of course thought we were really young because I was 20, he was 20, you know. But we knew what we wanted at the time. And then he decided to go active military. And as soon as he signed those papers, they said, "Okay, you can wait 6 to 12 months before you even get your orders to go anywhere." So they said it could take a while. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, he got orders. You leave next week.
Wow. So
Yeah.
so this decision being made for him to go from reserve to active, did you guys discuss that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you discussed it and decided, yeah, maybe that was a good idea for your family.
Yeah. He definitely wanted to go active duty. Mainly for the college reasons. He could get his degree and everything. And he was really struggling to find work. He was a heavy wheel mechanic, so semis and stuff like that. And he was struggling to find the work available for him, either in Wisconsin or Iowa, because when we weren't sure when we got married where we were going to live, and it really all depended on where he found a job as well.
Okay, so he was intending then to do 4 years and then go to school. Is that what he was thinking at that time?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was his job in the Army?
He was a heavy wheel mechanic, CR 63. So
Okay.
63 CR, sorry.
So that was his military training.
Mm-hmm.
Then when he went from reserve to active duty, did he keep the same?
Yes. Yep. When he joined active, when he got the notice that he was going, we got the option of 2 different locations that needed heavy wheel mechanics. And that was some base in Washington or Fort Hood, Texas. I was still in school at the time, so he chose Fort Hood, Texas because it was a little bit closer if we were to see each other, because I needed to finish my school. So he chose Fort Hood. So he went down there for 3 months while I was still finishing school. And he saved up 6 days of leave time. And so we chose our wedding date, June. And so that way he had 6 days saved up to come back home and get married. So I planned the wedding in 3 months, down from the wedding dress to the venue and everything. And we used his sign-on bonus. That was what we used to get married. So yeah.
Good. So where did you get married at then?
We got married at my church on the south side of Des Moines. And then our reception was about a half an hour away at a VFW. So in Pleasantville, Iowa. So yeah.
Okay. And did you guys have a honeymoon?
Nope, we didn't have a honeymoon. We got married that Saturday, and that Sunday we drove down to Texas. So we spent our first day of marriage driving 16 hours back down to Texas. So.
Well, there's your honeymoon. You got to spend time
exactly.
together. So then, so you had a U-Haul packed up because you had finished school and you were...
The military actually moved us down there.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So a Mayflower came and packed all my stuff. So, yeah.
All right. Was that hard saying goodbye to your family, or you were just ready to be with your
No,
husband?
it was very difficult. I've never been, anywhere outside of Iowa. So, and then all of a sudden I'm getting married and moving to a completely different state the next day. So yeah, it was difficult. Me and my mom talked on the phone daily when I moved to Texas, because then I had to find a job as well. And Fort Hood, Texas is very, I don't know the word, commercialized, because it's a very large base. Killeen is, and so a lot of the jobs offered were a lot of retail. No businesses, no sky rises or anything like that. So it was very, very difficult to find a job that, I guess what I wanted to go into. So yeah, I ended up finding a job at a bank as a bank teller. So that was my first job in Texas.
What did you think of Texas when you arrived?
I loved it. I absolutely love Texas. I need warmth. So I absolutely loved it. We did get snow 3 times during the 6 years we lived there, but it was always gone and melted by 9 in the morning. But everything else was closed for the day. So, but we got to visit San Antonio while we were there, Waco and Austin. We were pretty much right in the middle of Texas. You could drive 4 hours in any direction and still be in Texas. So it was about an hour north of Austin. And so we went to Austin quite a bit. This was before Joanna Gaines and Waco, so we didn't really spend a lot of time. Knowing now, it would be completely awesome.
It would be different.
Yes, it would.
So, what kind of things would you and Casey do in the Texas area? You'd go to different cities to see them. Were there particular things like sporting events or just in general to see a new city?
Yeah, Casey wasn't really into sports. Neither was I. I didn't grow up in a family that watched them, so that was fine. We went fishing a lot. We found a lot of nice fishing holes. I think every weekend involved a lot of fishing, and then mainly just hiking and finding fish in silly places. That's what we did.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
How did Casey adjust to active duty life?
It was difficult at first. The rank he was, because he was in the Guard, they automatically put him as an E2 instead of an E1, and it's just living there with his age and experience was very difficult because a lot of the privates were just freshly out of high school, 18 years old, didn't really know, what their job role was, even though they were a heavy wheel mechanic. So he had a lot of difficulty, but he finally got the knack of it and took people under his wing. Once he realized that, these are just kids trying to find their own way just like he was. So, but it was, there were many times he would come home just frustrated, and then finally it just clicked. So yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Because any big change would have an adjustment to it, so it sounds like he adjusted then.
Yeah.
Appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did your family and friends come visit while you were in Texas?
Yeah. My parents came a couple times for Christmas one year, and then during the summer they took their RV. They drove their RV all the way down. And then I remember one year I was so excited to see my sister. She decided it was her spring break in high school, and one of her friends was going down to I can't remember the name of the city. It's one of the furthest points in Texas. Starts with a G. But they were driving down, and Killeen was actually the halfway point from Iowa to the city in Texas.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was over 20 some hours because it was a 16-hour drive from here to Iowa. And so the only reason she went was so she could stop and see me. And so we got to spend some time just talking, and then they were like, okay, let's go. And she's like, but can I just stay here for the week? But no, they made her go all the way back down to, I think it was Gainesville. No, I can't remember. It's a town way south.
Yeah, I could guess, but I'm not sure if Galveston is.
Yeah, that's
is
what
that
it is.
what it
Galveston.
was? Okay.
Yep.
I wasn't sure if it
Yeah.
was that far south. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the one time I got to see her outside of seeing my mom and dad. And of course, my mom came down when Isaac was born. And then she came down when Alex was born as well.
So when Isaac was born, I guess let's delve into that since you have 2 handsome sons.
Yes.
So how long had you been in Texas when you found out you were pregnant?
We moved in June of 2001, and then in November, Casey wanted to start a family. So we started trying in that January We got pregnant, and then I ended up losing the baby, and they said to wait 3 months. So we waited 3 months, and I got pregnant again. So it was almost a year before we had lived in Texas fully.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was an anticipated pregnancy, and what was Casey's reaction and your reaction to finding out you were having a boy?
We actually didn't know we were having a boy until he was born. We had, I think, an ultrasound every month up until our 8th month, just to try and find out what we were having, but he hid every single time. And like the further along I got, they're like, the less we're going to be able to see, because they're just so big in there. So yeah, he was a surprise. So everything was yellow for him.
Oh, that is so funny.
Yeah. So we had to have a name picked out for a boy and a girl, and I don't even remember what our girl name was that we chose.
How did you choose Isaac?
We wanted something out of the Bible, and because I was young and 21, I didn't want something that you could shorten. I don't know.
That's funny.
I know. So we chose Isaac, not knowing at the time that I guess you can shorten it to Zach or Ike, but I don't know. I was 21, but it was the name we both agreed on that we really liked.
So when he came out and the doctor said it's a boy.
Yep. It was actually quite strange because he came out and he was blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And of course, I have brown hair and gray eyes, and Casey has black hair and green eyes. And so I immediately started looking at him, and I was like, oh, look, he has your ears. Just trying to find something.
That's funny.
Not even thinking that, my sister's blonde. Both of his sisters and father are blonde,
So he had no thought about it.
No.
You were...
But it was just a shock. I was like, where did this blonde-haired kid come from?
Oh. So how was adjusting to new motherhood?
Oh, Isaac was a very difficult baby. I swear, if they're difficult as a child, they will be angelic as older. I don't know, because he's like the perfect kid now. But he had a lot of temper tantrums, crying all the time. It was awful. And I didn't have, any family around. So, and of course I'm this young mother at the same time, but now that I look back on it, it's just probably just normal kid baby stuff.
That's hard though, not having family around. Were you able to form a nice community of military spouses?
Not really. Surprisingly, a lot of the people in his unit were just single kids. There was one, I can't even remember his name anymore, that took Casey under his wing, and he had a wife. They met in Germany, so she's German, but they were an older couple. When I say older, I'm 30s,
When you're 21, that's
Yes.
older.
And they had like the family Thanksgiving for everyone, and there were 20-some single soldiers and stuff like that. So they were the only really couple that really kind of took us in and, made us feel like family. So yeah, that was another thing that made it difficult, was because everyone was just these single young kids. So
A lot of bases in the Air Force, it's very popular to have play groups.
mm-hmm.
Did Fort Hood have those?
Not really. I found, I don't know if you remember Yahoo groups.
Yes.
Yes. So that was very big back in the early 2000s. I was able to find some groups that way. So we would meet at the Burger King and the McDonald's that had the play places and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
yeah. But that was it. Otherwise, if they had them, I wasn't aware because Fort Hood was just so large.
Yeah.
They were for the 1st Cavalry Division and 4th Infantry Division and stuff like that. So, and because we weren't either of those, we were with a quartermaster unit. We never really felt connected to, either of those.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Another thing that made it difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then your second son.
So we got married in 2001, June of 2001, and then 3 months later, September 11th happened. And so we knew something was going to happen. He was actually probably going to get deployed. Luckily, it didn't take, his unit wasn't deployed until 2004. So he was deployed, I think it was an August or September timeframe of 2004, he deployed.
How did you guys find out about that?
He just came. I don't know how he found out, but he just came one day and said, you know, he got his orders. We were actually set up to go. He got his orders to go to a different Fort Leonard Wood, Kansas, and then that was stop lost. And then we got orders to go to, he finally got approved to go to Germany, and then that was stop lost because of the war. And then he had the option of actually becoming a recruiter. They find you, I guess, when you become a recruiter. And so we had the ability to go back home. You can choose your location, and then that was stop lost as well. So we stayed in Fort Hood, Texas, all 6 years of our military career. But yeah, he just came home one day and said he was getting deployed, and then it was just a waiting game, just waiting for the date and the time.
So at that point, because I know that's a big moment, even though you know it might be coming when it happens, it's a lot to process.
It is, yeah.
So did you, I imagine you called home?
Yes, yep. At that time, his brother had just graduated high school and wasn't really doing anything, so he offered to move to Texas so I wouldn't be alone. So he moved down, Josh did, to live with us. So he came prior to Casey deploying, but that was really nice, just to be able to have some kind of family around. But that didn't last very long. I think it was 3 months after Casey was gone, I said, I can't do this. So I asked Josh if it was okay. I was like, are you fine with going back home to Wisconsin? Because I want to go back home to Iowa while he's gone. And he's like, yes, please. This isn't what I thought it was going to be.
But a very nice gesture on
yes,
his part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he got to experience something else, you know,
Yes.
for those 3 short months.
Yes.
But so I moved back home to Iowa while he was deployed.
Okay, so you came back home and you had your baby, your first son.
Yes, yep. And Casey got approved for his R&R, and he let my parents know, but he kept it a surprise to me. And so I had no idea he was coming. And I remember getting in the car one day, I don't even remember where I was going. And I come out of my parents' house and he's standing there. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And so that was his 2 weeks R&R. So we went back to Wisconsin so he could see his family. And that's when we decided for our second baby. And during those 2 weeks, it actually worked. So
The window was the right time.
yes,
huh?
it was.
So while he was home for that 2 weeks R&R, I've heard stories where it went very well and some where it didn't go very well.
This one went really well. Yeah. We hadn't seen each other. We'd talked to each other over the phone. We didn't do video conferencing or anything like that. I don't even know if that was available back then. Maybe. But it was a lot of over the phone through his satellite phones. Always cut short and everything because they didn't have stations set up like they do now. It was literally just, here's a satellite phone, that they would call from.
Did you guys write a lot of letters as well?
Yeah, we wrote a few. I think I wrote him more than he wrote me. I would send him care packages and stuff like that.
Was his deployed location one that was kind of transient, or was he in the same location the whole time?
He was first in Turkey, for a while, and then they drove the caravan up into Iraq, and they were at a base. Because since he was a heavy wheel mechanic, they actually repaired the vehicles that were going out and about. So his was a full-fledged base that he was at. So yeah, they just stayed there the entire time.
While he was home on R&R, did he share with you how that experience was going, or did he try to protect you from the stresses he was under?
No, he told me things. I know there was one night, they were out somewhere, and they came back, and their actual, I guess barracks you would call them, but they were actually just the big metal, like, buildings that they look like they're on trains. You know, that's what they slept in.
Okay.
They were just big metal.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Those were actually all shot up. Someone had gone in and shot holes through all of them. And so he showed me pictures of those, and he said, you know, if we would have been there sleeping, you know, that would have been us. And his truck that he drove was all shot up along the side. And it was just while they were inside the base. They weren't even driving anywhere. And then there was one time, there was a suicide driver, I guess. He strapped a bomb to his chest and tried to drive into the facility, but they were able to stop him, and the car blew up at the entrance of the base. So those are the two things he did share with me.
Was anyone else injured, or just the driver?
Just the driver. Yeah.
Well, that's a miracle, probably,
Yes.
in itself.
Yeah. He did share lots of stories. He became friends with the little kids there, and they would all sell them. He called them Haji DVDs. He brought many of those home. A lot of them were where someone was in a movie theater with a phone, you know, recording the actual movie. And so that's how they got to see their entertainment. But they were all done really nice and cool. Like, each of them had their own, like, DVD case with a picture on it and everything. Like, they went all out.
Did some of them, because some I got in Kuwait, would have only like half the movie? Did you have some that didn't finish?
You know, I could never actually finish watching them myself.
Okay.
So possibly. You gotta pay, you know, the second fee for that other half, maybe.
So then, so Casey returned after his 2 weeks of R&R.
Yep.
And did you guys continue the same type of communication? He went back to the same location?
Yep. He was able to, it's basically, he could call once a week is what it was. And then when he was able to go to Qatar, they gave him a little 4-day weekend, and that's where they could, here's your drink coupon, you know. That's when he called me, like, every night.
I imagine Qatar was very appreciative of all these military guys showing up with drink tickets.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure they made a lot of money.
I can imagine the decompressing that was happening
Yes.
on those trips.
Yeah.
Was that just one time, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was able to go once. But then when I did find out that I was pregnant, I couldn't wait for him to call me, you know.
Yeah,
we didn't
so
even know. Yeah.
you had hoped to become pregnant, but you didn't
Right.
know prior to him leaving.
Yeah.
So how did you find out that you were?
I took a pregnancy test, and it said negative. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess it didn't work. And then it was like 2 months later, I just realized I needed to take another one. And so I took another one, and that's when I found out I was pregnant. So,
Okay.
and they were like, well, we can guesstimate the time. I was like, I know exactly the time. So yeah, that's when I found out. And so I waited, I think it was 5 days for him to call me before I could finally tell him that I was pregnant.
That would have been difficult.
It was very difficult. Yeah. You know, Facebook wasn't around back then. So.
Right. So then you had to wait 5 days to tell him. What was his reaction?
He actually, we lost the call. And so I don't know if like we actually lost the call or he just got excited so much that he like dropped the phone and it hung up. But he was so happy. He was so excited that, you know, everything that we'd wanted, because we wanted 2 kids. That was our goal while he was in the military. So, and then after that, it was counting down the days to when he was back.
So I imagine you found the gender out while he was still gone.
Yeah.
Was that kind of a discussion of, should we find out? Should we not find out since you're not here? Or you just wanted to know?
We really wanted to know because not knowing the first time was horrible. So, we really wanted to know.
Did your mother go with you to your ultrasound for that?
Yes. We went there and we found out it was a boy. And then she also gave us some indications. He had 1 marker for potential Down syndrome. And so I had to not only go through the stress of Casey not being there, but also the stress of thinking that maybe he had Down syndrome as well. So it was a very stressful pregnancy. I only gained 9 pounds throughout the whole pregnancy. Each time I went to the doctor, they were like, oh, it's a pound, you've gained a pound, you know. So there was a lot of stress put on me during that time frame.
So the loss of weight, or the lack of weight gain, was due to stress?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But it might not have been as well, because with Isaac, I only gained 18 pounds. So they told me I probably shouldn't have any more children after that, just because of the impact that they both had on my body.
Okay.
So, which was fine because I only wanted 2. But Alex afterwards had a lot of complications as well. He couldn't keep anything down, threw everything up all the time. He was classified as failure to thrive, things like that. So, yeah, his pregnancy and birth was a lot different from Isaac, but Casey was actually there for the birth.
So Casey was able to come home?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, he was actually back from deployment when he was born.
Okay, so you continued to stay in Iowa for the rest of the deployment with your family.
Yep.
And then they were able to help you out some with Isaac?
Yeah, it was just, by the time Casey got his R&R, he was just scheduled to be back 3 months later. So it wasn't like all that much. So,
Okay, so the bulk of his deployment had been prior to you becoming pregnant again.
Yep.
So he came home, and did you stay in Iowa for a little bit then, or did you guys head back to Texas?
Well, for his R&R, we stayed in Iowa and Wisconsin, and then he went back. And so those three remaining months, I stayed in Iowa, and then moved back to Texas before he was being brought home.
Okay, prior to him coming home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I finished out my pregnancy and everything with Casey around. So
Okay.
the last 6 months of the pregnancy.
Okay, so then when Casey returned, what was his homecoming like?
They had a big ceremony. It was in like a gym, but I just remember it taking forever. Like I could care less if they were all just standing there and people were congratulating them, because they were all just standing there, and there was a ceremony of them, welcoming them back and stuff. And I was just like, who cares? Just let us see them. That's what I remember about it. The ceremony was a lot of pomp and circumstance, and I was just like, just get it over with.
We just want to go home.
Yeah. So, but that was basically the homecoming. So, yeah.
Yeah. So he came home, and then you're back together as a family.
Mhm.
Did everything seem fine
Yeah.
at that point?
Yep. Casey started having a lot of PTSD. It probably took about a year for after his homecoming. At least he had. I know he couldn't like sleep and stuff like that, but it really started affecting him. It took about a year, and he started going to the doctor. The hospital, and I don't know, he stopped talking about the deployment. He wouldn't talk about things at all, and then there were 2 times he checked himself into the hospital, the mental health facility, because he felt that it was either that or end his own life. So there were several times where he was just gone for a week or 2 at the facility, just to keep himself from hurting himself. But I don't really know the circumstances behind it. He never really talked to me about it. But it really was just almost like a shift, like an instant shift. So I don't know what really happened that would, cause the PTSD to just start all of a sudden, unless it was just he couldn't hide it anymore.
Yeah, so it seems like you guys had really good communication,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden that shifted
Yeah.
to where you weren't sure what exactly was happening.
And I think a lot of it was, the only thing I could think of really was all of his people started moving on, getting deployed other places, or not deployed, but orders to go other places, and he was still at Fort Hood in the same unit, and people started leaving, and he was still just left there by himself.
And these were folks he had deployed with.
Mm-hmm.
These were folks that he had experienced very traumatic events with.
Yep. Yeah.
Because even if he wasn't in the dorm that night when it got shot up, that happened to their
Right.
living quarters. I mean,
Exactly.
that's some intense stuff.
Yeah.
And so as their person's leaving one at a time, I think that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think that's a lot of the the breakdown of how things became how they did, just.
And then at home, the stress of a baby that's having some health
Mm-hmm.
problems that as a man, maybe he was internalizing he couldn't fix.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that could be a lot of it too. It's just things just piled on top of each other.
Right. And so how did you process when he would check himself into the emergency room?
I didn't really know how to process. I knew he was doing it to help him, but I was also trying to raise 2 children on my own as well, away from my family, and all that stuff too. So I think there was a little. I was obviously always there for him, and we would go to the meetings together to talk. But there might have been some resentment. It's hard to even think, how I felt back then. Just trying to raise kids and stuff alone, it was difficult, especially since, there was no family to help me. So, and everyone, all of his, unit members that I had somewhat come close to were gone too,
Yeah.
So
as you're trying to survive and keep life as stable as possible for your children,
mm-hmm.
were you able to be really honest with your support system back home, or were you kind of trying to protect them from knowing how stressed you were as well?
I was certainly trying to protect that. Yeah. Everything's happy and, So, yeah. I don't think they knew at all. And I mainly did that because I was so far away and they couldn't help, So, they didn't really know. They didn't have any idea either. So, yeah. I remember when the hospital had decided to process him on a medical discharge because it just kept getting worse and worse. And that process took 3 months to finally get him medically discharged. Me and the boys, we put our house up for sale when they officially started, and then the house sold in 2 weeks, and we weren't expecting that. So me and the boys moved back home while he finished out his process. So we came home in October, and then he didn't get back to Iowa until January of that 2006, I think. 2007. 2007 is when he finally got out.
Was he able to stay in like barracks or something?
Yeah. He could either stay there, and I think he might have stayed with another sergeant that he was friends with too.
So was the Army kind of keeping an eye on him, knowing that he was going through some things?
His buddies were, but I don't think, like the commanding officers and stuff like that, I don't think they were really. That was another problem. He had a lot of problems with the upper, higher ranks, but I think a lot of that had to do with his anger and his PTSD too.
So by this point, he was expressing some anger. You were seeing a shift in his personality, and his personality prior to the deployment.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe his personality before?
He was always quick to anger. I would give him that. But it wasn't until afterwards where he was just, playing a computer game and getting mad and putting a hole in the wall for no reason, things like that afterwards. We had to replace many walls after that. And then kicking in doors and stuff like that. And it was, it was never directed towards me or at me or anything, but it was just out of the blue for no reason from what I could see, But that was when I was kind of glad the house sold, so I could bring the boys home for a while and he could work on just focusing on him. And I knew Sergeant Powell was really there for him and really helped him through a lot of stuff. So.
Were you working with anyone, a therapist or something?
No. Mm-mm. No.
In hindsight, do you wish you had?
I think so, yeah. I still keep a lot of stuff inside. No one really knows. Everyone just sees the happy-go-lucky person. I think it probably would help, even today to go see someone. I still don't, so. I've tried, and I just find myself, like, lying as the happy-go-lucky person, and I'm like, oh, therapy doesn't work, but, you have to be honest and truthful. But, again, it's, one of those telling other people your problems. I've always felt like, why should I tell people my problems? They have problems of their own. That's always been how I've...
Well, because they're getting paid to hear them.
Yeah, I know. That's very true.
When you came home and you were actually back in Iowa and Casey was still in Texas, at that point, did you feel like you could let your family know a little more about what was going on?
Yeah, I felt that, they knew he was getting medically discharged, and, but I didn't really tell them, the ramifications or the big parts of it. I just said he was getting medically discharged, and, that was about it. And my job was to find a house to buy, so we had a place to live when he got back. So.
In your mind, were you in survival mode, or were you going, what am I going to do?
I was in survival mode. Yeah.
Like pretty soon this will change and we'll all be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. He just needs to get away from the military and start a new life. That's what's gonna help. But then he couldn't keep a job after he got back. He went from job to job. I think there were like 6 jobs in probably 8 months. And a lot of it was all him, really. It was, he knew more than his bosses, He did all of this, in the military and all these snot-nosed kids was his term. You know, think that they could tell him what to do and stuff like that. So that was a big problem. Whether he was fired or he just quit, you know, after such a short amount of time, it was he had no respect for, you know, the people who he was supposed to report to, and that was really difficult for him. So then he decided he was going to just go to school and get his master's. He was going to get a mechanical engineering degree. So that's what he started working on. But he was on a lot of pills, and he saw the VA all the time. There were still times where he would just not come home, and he would have to tell me, you know, call me from the VA and say, you know, he didn't have a good day, so he checked himself in again. So,
So his checking himself in again, he was trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
He was trying to find the time that someone would help him feel better.
yeah, absolutely.
Over and over. Wow.
Yeah. He probably did that, I would say, at least 6 to 7 times. He would check himself in.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he got in a program for PTSD, and he actually went to Omaha for 30 days to work out the PTSD problems and all that stuff. And I don't know what it was, because he wasn't allowed to talk to anyone outside of that group. It was kind of like a rehab or something. I don't know what it was, but that didn't help. I thought it would, but it didn't really do anything.
How was his relationship with the boys during all of this?
They were his saving grace. Yeah. They were the only thing that kept him going. And I don't know how many times you would say that. Yeah.
So they would still have time with Dad at the park, fishing,
Yep. Canoeing.
canoeing.
Down the river. They would do full day trips.
And they were little guys, so he put a lot of work into that when he was
Absolutely.
taking little guys to do that stuff.
Yeah, that was, and they would go camping a lot. Casey was so excited when Isaac joined the Cub Scouts, and they would just, that was their thing together. They would just do all the scout things available. Yeah. I know it was getting really bad. His anger had increased a lot, and I knew it was time to take a break from him. When I was bringing the boys to the daycare one day, and I got them in the car, and Isaac said to me, "Hey, guess what, Mom? Today I wasn't scared of Dad." And so that let me know that they were living in fear. They never knew how he was going to react, what he was going to say, or how he was going to come home. And I knew that for their sake, we just needed to step away for a little bit. So that night when we got home, I told him I was going to take the boys and move in with my mom for a couple weeks. The next day at work, I got divorce paperwork. He had filed for divorce the next day. And I don't know why. He had gotten really delusional along those times. I remember there were many times where I could have a full-fledged conversation with him and he had no idea that I was even talking to him. We were just in the living room and I would tell him about Isaac's day or something like that, and he was just sitting next to me, but you could tell like everything was just going on in his head. And he would finally look over and he'd be like, "What'd you say?" You know. And so there was a lot of things going on in his head that I never even knew. One night we were at a campfire with my sister, and he thought this guy was looking at me wrong, and he just got up and punched him for no reason. And so my sister called the cops, and he spent the night in jail. And instead of telling me he was released, he decided to just walk home, and that was 8 miles. So he just started walking back home, and then he just showed up that day. I had no idea what was going on, or if he was released, or like if there was a trial date or anything. He wouldn't talk to me about it at all. It's just, he really, really, really like just, it almost felt like he had schizophrenia, you know. You just never knew what you were going to get with him. Yeah.
So by this time, it was clear to your family that there were some significant things going on.
Yeah, yeah.
How did your parents cope with that? Did they communicate with you and discuss, you know, safety and concerns they had, or did they trust that you were making proper decisions?
We were only 5 miles from my parents' house, so they knew that I could easily, you know, just hop in the car if I needed to. Their main concern was the kids, and I knew deep down that he would never ever attempt to hurt them or me. It was always against himself, you know, so I knew that I never had to worry about things like that. But my parents, his parents, you know, no one really understood, you know, and you don't unless you live with it. So, and I still don't, I don't understand, you know, his thought process or meaning either, but it's just,
And he probably didn't either.
yeah, not at all. Yeah. So,
What about with his side of the family? Did you communicate with them, or did they reach out to you with concerns about some changes in him?
we had pretty much, he had ceased communication with his dad. So he hadn't talked to his dad in like 2 years. His mom, he never really showed, you know, the problems for her. They grew up a really hard life, so he wanted to, you know, always show her how good and successful he had become, you know, thanks to her, type of thing. So, yeah, they never, I mean, I know that they knew he had issues and problems, but, you know, they didn't know the full extent of it, I don't think. So
when the divorce papers arrived, did you think, this is it? Did you think we can work through this, or was there some relief that there was a break happening that maybe you could figure something out on your own? Like, what were your thoughts?
my thoughts at first were, that's extreme. But then there was also a little bit of relief too, because I was just, it was a lot, you know, and knowing that my kids had to come first too. I didn't know how, you know, they would grow up, you know, living with a father that was like that. So that's kind of the relief I got, knowing that they could maybe have a better life if we weren't together. If they were scared every day to be home, you know, maybe this is the way we should go. And then he started, you know, accusing me of adultery, and I don't know. It was just, he had formed things in his mind that weren't even there. So it was, I don't know what it was really. It was never him. That's for sure. But.
And that's very common with PTSD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that now.
Yeah.
But so we it took 18 months for the divorce to get finalized. We tried mediation and everything, and that didn't work. I remember his lawyer asking for mediation, and I was very hopeful, but there was no mediating involved. You know, even the mediator told us this is a waste of your money. So we basically waited down to the court date, and it was going to be the judge's decision. And the hearing was at 9, and at 8 o'clock he said, okay, let's work this out. So we waited 18 months. They call it the decision on the courthouse steps, I guess. So that's when he's like, you know, for visitation rights and everything like that, and how everything was going to go. And then my lawyer, for purposes of Casey's behavior, he asked that the decision on the paperwork actually be recorded in the courthouse. So we went through each page, and he had him go on stand, and there was a court reporter there, and they would say, do you agree to this? And he would say yes. Do you agree to this? And he would say yes. So it was actually court reported, so he could not go back later and have problems. And then 18 months later, after that, he passed away.
So for the 18 months following that time period, his custody was what? Did he have weekends?
He had every other weekend and every Wednesday overnight is what he had.
And did that seem to be going well with the boys?
It did, yeah. And you know, he was never late. He was always there on time. I was completely accommodating. I knew that he needed the boys, and the boys needed him as well. So you know, if there were times he asked for extra time, I absolutely gave it to him. You know, I wanted to take him to Wisconsin outside of, you know, the family, the scheduled times, and I let him go and stuff like that, just because, you know, the boys were his life. So I knew that was what was really keeping him going. So
and was Casey working then by this time?
he was going to school full time.
Okay. And was school successful for him?
I thought it was, yeah. He was actually starting to, you know, seem like his life was getting back together. He found an old Marine friend that moved in with him to help pay the rent on the house. And he was going to school full time. I know he was with a girl. Like every girlfriend he had, he was absolutely in love with her, and he moved them in. There were 3 of them, I think, in the 18 months. Well, it was after we were divorced. We weren't divorced yet, but we were separated. And then up until his death, I think there were at least 6 girlfriends I know of. But he had moved them in. They each had their own kids and stuff like that, and each one, I think, maybe lasted 3 months. And I reached out to, I know, one of them after Casey had passed, because that was the one I knew, and I wanted to let her know that he had passed away. And she had told me things that, like, you know, he would disappear for hours on end, just go for walks hours on end, you know, and so she was seeing a lot of the stuff that I was seeing too. So I don't think he was actually getting better, you know. School was helping, but he was still, you know, still having a lot of problems. So, yeah.
So when what was the situation surrounding his passing?
That was really confusing. It was a Wednesday, so he was supposed to pick up the boys, and I got a call from the daycare saying that it was past 6 and he hadn't been there yet. So I picked them up, not even thinking. I tried calling him, I tried texting him, and I didn't hear anything at all. And then it's like 9 o'clock at night, his girlfriend called me, and she asked if I had heard from him at all. And I said no, in fact, he didn't even pick up the kids. I have them. And she said, well, I haven't seen him since 9 o'clock this morning. She worked at the Casey's up the street, and so she could actually see the house from where she worked, and she saw the truck. The truck was there when she left that morning, and at 9 o'clock she remembers looking out and not seeing the truck there anymore. And when she got off work, she got home, and his cell phone was still at the house, but his dog tags that he kept on the dresser were gone. And so she knew something was wrong. So she filed a missing persons report right away. And then the detective had called me to ask questions and stuff like that. And then I think it was 3 days. It took 3 days for them to finally find him. He was in his car. This was in February. In a remote park. They found his truck there, and that's where they found him, inside his truck. And they had assumed it was overdose of pills, because there were 5 or 6 empty bottles of pills in the car, an empty Gatorade bottle, and like where he had thrown up, it was all over the car as well. So they had thought that that's what had happened. And so we had a whole funeral on suicide and how God is accepting of it and everything like that. I told my kids that's how he had passed. I actually reached out to someone asking how to even tell kids that your father has passed away. And she just said, with kids you have to be blunt. They had never experienced death before, not even our family dog, no grandparents, nothing. So I just sat them down and told them straight up, and then any questions they had, I was completely honest with them. And so even though they didn't quite understand, they understood a little bit. I remember Alex was 5 at the time, and it was even like 3 months later. He had asked me, when's Dad coming back from being dead? You know, I miss him. So it's just something that 5-year-old minds can't wrap their head around, which they shouldn't have to. So we got the autopsy report back 8 weeks later and found out it wasn't suicide at all. And I still don't understand it, because it just doesn't make any sense. The report came back saying it was pneumonia and hypothermia. They said that he had probably had pneumonia for maybe 3 days. And he probably didn't even know he had it. And the toxicology report came back that normal amounts of pills that were supposed to be in his body were there. So my thought process still to this day, because he had attempted it in the past, was he attempted it and maybe changed his mind and then tried to throw them all back up and aspirate it into his lungs, which is what pneumonia is. And since it was February in the middle of nowhere, he didn't have his phone to call for help. He was alone.
That's a lot to have to process.
Yeah.
As time went on with the boys, how did your families respond?
My parents, of course, since I was in Iowa, were right there for everything. We had been divorced for 18 months, so I remember his sister at the funeral coming and asking, she's like, are we ever going to be able to see the kids after this? And all I could think was, why is that even a question? You know, they're still family and they always will be. So, every year, they spend a week or two in Wisconsin with the family. His mother never got over his death. She got really depressed. She lost her job. She just passed away last year. She got dementia really bad. And after reading up on it, I found out that people who are depressed, it's the same chemical in the brain that creates the dementia. And so a lot of people who with dementia had some sort of depression in the past. So I think, you know, the amount of depression that she was under, you know, really took its toll on her. Because, yeah.
That's tough. Did the boys have a nice relationship with her?
Yeah.
So that's another loss then that they've just recently gone through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Their grandpa Brown, he had a hard time because him and Casey had just recently started talking again when he had passed. And so he had a hard time, you know, thinking of all the stupid stuff that went through, you know, that they went through without talking. You know, he still tells me to this day that it doesn't matter, you know, you never know what could end, so, you know, put stupid stuff behind you. That was his biggest regret, was, you know, letting the anger of past things, you know, keep them apart. So.
But they had reconnected.
Yeah, 2 months prior.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Still wasn't enough time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So.
So the boys go every year. So with Casey's mother having passed, I'm sure the boys will continue their visits.
Oh, yeah.
In the summer.
Yeah, they usually spend their time at their Aunt Mandy's house. And then she does all the traveling to all the family members, so everyone gets a chance to see them.
That's really nice.
Yeah. So, they've got an aunt, Chrissy. She lives in California. And when it's time for them to come up there, she usually tries and makes a trip.
That's nice.
Yeah. Now that they're older, Mandy wants to take them to California next year. So that might be something that maybe we'll just all make a vacation out of it. So.
Yeah, what part of California?
I think it's Northern California.
Okay.
I have no idea where.
California's like the whole East Coast.
Yes.
Or West. My
West
direction's
Coast,
West
yeah.
Coast.
I know that they get fall weather because she just posted on Facebook they were taking a walk in the park and they had fall colors. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's pretty far north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When your boys went through the loss of their dad, how did their friends respond? I know they were so little, and I don't think kids always understand this.
No, kids didn't really respond. School didn't really respond. I don't know. It was almost just like no one knew what to do. So no one did anything, pretty much. Yeah. Isaac was at a birthday party when we found out Casey had passed. His very first overnight birthday party. And so I didn't tell them until that Sunday, later in the evening, because I remember picking up Isaac from the birthday party and he was like, "Mom, this is the best day ever." Because he got his bed. They stayed in a basement in a tent and they stayed up all night. It was like a campfire. It's like, I can't wait to have my birthday party so I can invite Nicholas over. And I just remember it. And we ruined his best day.
That's really tough. Have they been able to attend therapy or programs to better understand PTSD, or do you guys work through that as a family?
We worked through it as a family. I did have them go to therapy at the beginning. It was really hard though because they were so young, 5 and 8, you know. I've always kept communication wide open with them. Everything is always, you know, you got something on your mind, you tell it, you know. I'm not going to be offended, I'm not going to get mad, you know, because feelings matter. So we've always just really worked through it as a family.
They're really lucky to have a mom that is that open and that they feel they don't have to protect you by pretending to be okay.
Yeah.
That they can come to you. That's really good.
Thank you. I just see the struggle that Casey had growing up, because he didn't have that, and I don't want that for them. So feelings really do matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine your dad has filled in a little as the male figure of the family for them.
Yeah. They would spend summers with my parents. They just live 40 minutes from here. And it started out initially to help with daycare costs. They would spend the week with grandparents and then they would come home with me on the weekends. And a lot of it for me was, so they live on an acreage, so it got them out of the house, learning how to change oil and fix tires and everything. So then my dad bought an old Jaguar, like a 1980 something Jaguar, a couple years ago. He bought 2 of them actually, so he could take the parts of each one and make one. And so Isaac and him have been working on rebuilding it.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, and Isaac's hoping that when he gets his license, that'll be his first car.
Sounds like it will be.
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, so he's definitely been able to pitch in and help with the boy things.
That's good.
Yeah. So.
And how have you been since that happened? Since Casey's passing?
I had to put on a front for a very long time that everything was fine. mainly for the kids. So a lot of the emotions were kept. But now that they're older and they are understanding more, we all talk about it a lot more. A lot of it's, it's been 8 years. So, it's been, it resurfaces. I've moved on from my job, from the place I worked when it happened. So, I felt like I was able to kind of start new and no one knew my history. So that made it easier to just not act like anything had happened. But then people catch themselves putting their foot in their mouth a lot, because they don't know my story or my background. I remember, just a lot of times people ask, because I talk about my kids all the time, and they're like, well, is the father in your life at all? Do they ever do anything? And that's when I have to, well, he passed away, And then, you can tell they feel absolutely horrible. I'm like, you don't have to feel horrible. I've never, I don't share this stuff with people. So, things like that. The outreach, the survivor outreach at Camp Dodge has been extremely helpful. They have dinners once a month for all the survivors of veterans who have passed, and it's parents and grandparents and husbands and wives and whatnot. They get together. They've provided me with resources to help me out with a lot of stuff. Amanda the Panda does things. We have like every year for their birthday they get a box from the Soldier's Child Foundation. It's kind of like a big birthday present for all of them. So we get things like that. Yeah, there's been a lot of help. So yeah.
That's nice. I imagine for the boys when they go there, instead of being boys who've had this thing that is hard to talk about, that you don't just openly talk about, but to then be in an environment where everyone knows how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if it wasn't their dad, you have this commonality. You're in this safe place.
Yeah, absolutely. We just got done every year. We hang an ornament on a tree for Casey, and we do that every year. It's kind of like our tradition now. And then it's like a potluck afterwards, and you just go and visit with everyone and tell your stories, and it's definitely a lot better for, this isn't a military town, so a lot of people just don't understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice that you found that community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Misty actually reached out to me because she was actually helping Casey when he did pass. She was in a different program at the time and helping him, and then when he passed, she had just moved to the survivor outreach, and so she actually contacted me to help me along.
That's very sweet of her that she sought you out.
Yeah.
That's good. Can you think of anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to share? Any special memories that stick out in your mind?
The memories I was planning on sharing was, when he proposed to me, and I remember when Alex was born. He was going to school at night, and I remember it was like 4:00 in the afternoon, and my mom was there because the doctor had said that it was any minute now, so my mom had rushed down, and I remember it was 4:00 because we were watching Oprah, and I was just like, I just don't feel good. I know I'm not in labor, I'm not anything like that, but I just don't feel good. So my mom's like, let's go to the hospital. So we get there and they're like, you're right, you're not in labor, but it's gonna be any minute now, so we can't release you. And so my mom walked around with Isaac, 6 hours. But I knew I couldn't have this baby without Casey. He was taking his finals, so he couldn't even like answer his phone. And it was like 9 o'clock at night when he finally got done with his finals, and he checked all of his voicemails. And he rushed straight to the hospital, and Alex was born 2 minutes later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just barely.
Yep. And so I knew, I was like, I am not having him without him. You know, I was just holding out and holding out. And so he got in for the last minute and he got a cheers on. But yeah, so that's one story I definitely will always remember. My mom was so mad at him. I can't believe you almost missed it. He's like, I have finals. It's like she said he was going to be due 2 weeks ago and he's still not here, so yeah.
But finals don't care about that.
No, they don't.
The instructor doesn't change their schedule.
Come to find out, he did tell his instructor. He's like, what were you doing here? He's like, I would have accommodated for that.
But he's used to being in the military where there really aren't
Right.
accommodations.
Exactly.
That's
It's like, oh,
funny.
my phone was off. I didn't even know she was going into labor.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What things do you see in your boys that make you think of their father?
Everything, all the time. The older that they get, I think both of them look exactly like their dad. Of course, the people that don't know him think they look exactly like me. And then I have to pull up a picture. I'm like, no, this is their dad. They're like, oh, I see it now. Isaac, definitely, the way he thinks things through, the way he, just the way he speaks, so eloquently. I definitely see a lot of that in him. Alex is a gentle soul. He thinks about everyone else before he thinks of himself, We'll be sitting here, I'll just watching TV or something, and he'll come out and he's, Mom, do you need anything? Absolutely no reason. I'm like, no, I'm okay. So I see that with Casey a lot. So yeah, just things like that.
That's very sweet.
Yeah. I'm excited to see them grow old, and I don't want them to ever move away. I've told them they can live with me as long as they want.
In fact, maybe make it a rule. You have to stay home until Mom says you can move. That seems fair.
Absolutely. You're married? Move her on in.
That sounds good to me with my son, sure.
Right.
Well, what advice would you have for military wives who are what we would now consider kids?
Right?
Who are young and who have this starry-eyed idea of what being a military wife is going to be and the adventures they're going to have and how much fun it will be, which of course there's the fun things as well.
Right, yeah.
But what we don't, I think of when we're young is the rest of it.
Yeah. Definitely find a support group. Even if they're not going to be deployed or anything, you need other people who get it, who understand. Find a mentor, if you will, a wife who's been in for a while. Just take one day at a time. Understand that you're not going to understand. Their career, whether it's 4 years or forever, it comes first, whether you want it to or not. You have to understand that. Yeah. Just take it one day at a time.